Hello, a gloomy Sunday morning. I'm watching on YouTube the latest video by Morgan Turner with the Danessa Myricks newest palette. And yeah, I have some unpopular thoughts. Let me switch off the TV. So first I'll share another temptation that I had today. Today I was almost going to buy the Dolce Gabbana palette because I found it at 20% discount at Douglas. But then I remember my own words from some videos ago where I said that distraction is the best weapon against addiction. And it's true. Actually, when I pronounced those words, it was during my vacation and I was distracted by connection with people, with friends, walking, sightseeing, having social life. Now that I back to a routine that involves less presence of people around me, I'm back to wanting to buy much more makeup. And okay, the season is the worst one in the sense that it's the most attractive season of the year with a lot of temptations, such as many limited editions for the holidays, beautiful packaging, all these things. So all of these temptations, but it's also a mood. I feel more sad and I tend to compensate that with makeup. And that's a pattern we have to be aware of. And maybe a reaction can be starting a different path. In my case, it works that I can understand my feelings about something before purchasing and avoid that purchase. Most of the time, my first thoughts and my reasoning is just confirmed. So watching YouTubers that make comparisons is very beneficial. Being aware of what's going on, what's going to be released is also very beneficial because then you can have kind of a big picture, an overview with all the releases, because maybe what's going to be released in a few months is better than what is available now, and therefore it may be worth waiting a bit for the best release instead of something mediocre available right now. That's not the case for the Dolce Gabbana, but watching more videos helped me to realize that Dolce Gabbana is very shimmery, and even the looks that I've seen on Lexi, for example, are not so special to the point that I can recognize she's wearing Dolce Gabbana on her eyes. It's very rare right now that something can be identified by just watching an eye look. And as my friend Anastasia, I will show you her Instagram, says, actually makeup is the epitome of quiet luxury, because once you wear the makeup, you don't know what brand it is. There are only two mattes. The taupe is too dark and reddish, in my opinion, and a black that is very lazy of a shade. I wish there was a brown. And the rest is all very glittery and shimmery with a more of a coarse glitter. From the looks that I've seen, they look standard. I'm not convinced about that heart shape packaging is in line with the brand. I mean, I've been buying Dolce Gabbana since 1995. I know the brand very well, talking about clothes and fashion. So I can see how it relates with the aesthetic of the brand, but it's just unpractical because honestly, that heart would be stored in my drawers, and that makes it unpractical to store. And those are all factors that made me decide not to buy the Dolce Gabbana palette. I want to steer that money towards the BYREDO palette. The color story is similar to the BYREDO palette. I much prefer the texture of the BYREDO palette because they're more versatile. I can use the BYREDO palette work. Also, the BYREDO palette has lighter transition shades that for me would be better than that taupe in the Dolce Gabbana palette. And instead of the black, the BYREDO one has a dark brown that I much prefer. So is a preference in terms of formula, texture, and colors. So I need to be more rational and use my rationality to win over the impulse buying of the Dolce Gabbana one. And now back to the Danessa Myricks palette. I think it is one of her best palettes. Okay, as you may know from my video about silky eyes, I'm appreciating more and more the silky eye effect, and I have an entire video about it. And I'm considering to buy just a refill of the Louis Vuitton because those are the current best interpretation of that silky texture, together with other brands that I mentioned in my video about silky eyes. And the three Louis Vuitton quads that I like the most were here, the green one, the purple one, and the blue one. And you see that the color stories here are the same. They are the elevated version, you know, the more subtle, less color switching. These by Danessa Myricks are interpretation with multi-chromes. What are the faults that I've seen? In the blue color story by Danessa Myricks, the problem is the laziness of the column on the left. So the presence of that plain gray and black. Why gray and black? Pat McGrath was smarter, in my opinion. She put a taupe. While that concrete gray there and a pure black, it's kind of less useful, in my opinion. Of course, you may say, okay, you can use the black to emphasize all of those duochromes and multichromes that you can find in this Danessa Myricks palette. The best color story is the purple, the central six pan, and I think she put that purple six pan in the center for a reason. Now, if I reflect, I have already those multichromes in my Cliona, and also I see here some very coarse shimmers. Of course, these are much more impactful, but these are textures that if you are a little bit mature, they will look a bit fancy. I don't like putting so much attention with very peculiar reflections and multichromes, getting the attention on the lines with these very flaky textures. I have all of these shades in my Cliona collection. I declutter quite a lot in the latest years because I simply was not using them. And these by Danessa Myricks are even coarser, are even chunkier. So keep that in mind. First, you may have already these shades from other indie brands. You may have already a more refined version because I think that Cliona is less chunky and therefore more flattering, especially on aged skin, compared to this Danessa Myricks. And already the Cliona, for me, I don't like the texture too much. At this point, we are seeing these multichrome everywhere, so they have lost their competitive advantage compared to other brands. And at the same time, they are very good quality, but still compared to the luxury brands I have, of course, the luxury brands do not provide those multichromes, but the textures that I can get from the usual brands I love are much superior. That is the truth for me, is my truth, of course. Finally, the green part. So we practically have only two greens paired with matte browns that are the usual warm peachy browns. So I have to say, my complaint is that the mattes here are not special enough. I much prefer the Groundwork palette. The mattes there were much more unique. I hope that she will update that Groundwork palette to make it compatible with this size of the pens so that you can mix and match. Because I think that is much more interesting in terms of matte shades compared to these ones. These are just common. They are not shades that would round up those multichromes for me. So these are my concerns about this palette and the reason why I think is an easy skip. For me, for sure, is an easy skip. But for many of you, consider these points. If you have Cliona, if you would appreciate the coarse textures here, if you would appreciate the plain and very standard mattes here. And so see you in my next video. Bye bye.